Well, good morning, church, and welcome to Holy Humor Sunday here at burlpres. As it has always been, it's tradition here that the Sunday after Easter is Holy Humor Sunday. So grab a laugh and your coffee and sing along with us.
I'll raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I'll raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I'll raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I'll raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I'll raise a hallelujah with everything inside of me. I'll raise a hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee. I'll raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. I'll raise a hallelujah. Fear you lost your hold on me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Sing a little louder in the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder, my weapon is the melody. Sing a little louder, heaven comes to fight for me. Sing a little louder, in the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder, my weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder, heaven comes to fight for me. Sing a little louder, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
Good morning again. As many of you know, the last thing I do every night is load a prayer for us to read and pray the next morning as a congregation. The prayers come from all sorts of places. Some of them I write, many of them are ancient prayers, and some come from other people who put them on their blog sites. One of the blog writers that I particularly enjoy, one night I read this on his blog. I bet your Sunday school teacher wasted that wonderful felt board to teach you some somber lesson about Jonah the prophet without a single confetti of irony. Too bad. The story of Jonah is some of God's best slapstick. Read it all at once. It only takes about 10 minutes. With your sense of humor intact, read it and laugh. Knowing that I was preaching again on Holy Humor Sunday, I took up that challenge, and I wasn't disappointed. This here is my new friend, Jonah. When he came in the mail, I was really disappointed because I also expected the whale to arrive. But there is much more to this Jonah than meets the eye. I actually even went so far as to email the people who gave it and sold this. And then all of a sudden, one day, I found a zipper. And lo and behold, there was the whale. So it's not so easy. Anyway, you put Jonah in the whale, and that's what the story of Jonah is all about, is Jonah getting swallowed by the whale. Anyway, isn't that a great toy? If somebody wants that toy, just give me a call, and I'll come up with a contest to get the whale. Similar to finding the big fish inside of the Jonah doll that put a smile on my face. The humor that I found in the actual story of Jonah also put a smile on my face. I was able to see things in the story by thinking that it was going to be funny that I had never seen before. It is responsible to read Scripture, to read the books of the Bible in accord with what kind of literature, what kind of genre it is. The Bible is filled with 66 different books, and there are books of law, of poetry, of folk tales, of letters, of worship songs, of wisdom saying, and each of those requires us to read them in a different way. Every day, we instinctively, without even thinking about it, we change the way in which we read. We'll read a newspaper one way, a poem another way, and that manual of instructions as to how to put software on your computer, we'll read that also in another way. Actually, we read newspapers, the different pages of the newspaper, in different ways. We'll read the front page in one way, the ads in another, the editorial page in another, the announcements of a marriage or an obituary. What we're reading determines how it is that we go about reading it. So what kind of a book is Jonah? Is it ironic satire, like the blogger suggested? Well, perhaps it is, but I have discovered that other scholars have lots of other ways of reading this book. Some say that we should read it as straight history, others as an allegory, a parable, legend, satire, short story, didactic fiction, or didactic history. The story itself certainly paints some images that tickle the imagination and the funny bone. Jonah, swallowed by a fish, then barfed him back up on dry land. I just howled when I first saw this picture. In the second part of Jonah, you have repentant animals dressed up in sackcloth. Now, I think that's a funny picture. Well, check this one out too. Oh, I love dogs, and especially praying dogs. One thing all scholars agree on is that no matter how you read the book of Jonah, it is a masterfully crafted work of literature. Let me show you. Every verse in chapters 1 and 2 is paralleled in chapters 3 and 4. There are two different stories that run parallel to each other. It is only in verse 3 Jonah disobeys in 1:3, and over in the third chapter, 3:3, where Jonah obeys. That's the real difference in the two stories. And whether Jonah obeys or disobeys changes what happens in the story. The main character in both the story in the first two chapters and the story in the third and fourth chapter is the prophet Jonah, which makes the story of Jonah different from all of the other books of prophecies. The focus in the other books of prophecy is on the words that God gives to the prophets. The focus is not on the prophets. In the other books, God is the main actor, but in this book, Jonah is the main actor. And in fact, in the whole book of Jonah, there are only 5 Hebrew words of prophecy. Let's take a moment here to dig down a little deeper into the text. The text starts out just like all of the other books do. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah. So far, so good. Let's see what verse 2 says. Go at once to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. That verse would have put a smile on the face, at least a quizzical look on the face of any ancient Hebrew. Jonah is being sent to the capital of the Assyrian Empire, the empire that is oppressing Israel. That's crazy. It's crazy because Jonah is a Hebrew prophet. Hebrew prophets aren't sent to the enemies of the Hebrew people. Hebrew prophets are sent to the Hebrew people to save them. Strange. Very strange. But let's see what happens. In verse 3, but Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid his fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Now wait a minute. This is a prophet. Instead of obeying God, the prophet runs in the other direction. Now here's a map. I want you to see what Jonah has done. He's down in Joppa. That's where he receives this word from the Lord. He's supposed to go to Nineveh, which is northeast, but instead he goes to Tarshish. Now Tarshish, as you can see, is in Spain, and at this time, that was in essence the end of the world, because it wasn't until 1492 that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So they knew nothing about what was beyond Spain or Tarshish. In response to Jonah getting on that ship, God says, ho, 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 wait, not so fast, Jonah. But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and such a mighty storm came upon the sea that the ship threatened to break up. The sailors that were on that ship, sensing that it was supernatural, they started praying to their gods, and they did everything that was in their power to keep the ship afloat. They threw things over. They played with the sails. Well, while they're doing all of this, where's the prophet of God? Where's Jonah? Well, there he is, sound asleep in the hull of the boat. The captain goes down, wakes up Jonah, and tells him to get praying to his God. Now that too is hysterically funny because Jonah has got to be the worst prophet ever. The prophet of God is asleep and clueless, while the pagan sailors are immediately able to identify the storm as supernatural. They pray, and they're the ones who get the prophet to do his job, to pray. They also use the ancient method of casting lots to discern who is responsible for this supernatural storm. The lot falls to Jonah. So immediately they ask him to explain himself. Jonah says, "I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." Do you hear the ironic humor in that? While knowing that God is the creator of both land and sea, Jonah tries to escape by boat via God's sea. Jonah follows that brilliant thought with another. He says to the sailors, "Just throw me overboard and the sea will calm down." But the sailors, unwilling to sacrifice Jonah to secure their own safety, take to the oars, trying as hard as they can to get them back to land. This too is crazy. The runaway prophet of God is contemplating suicide, while the sailors, who are stereotyped as rude and crude and foul-minded, try righteously to save him, but to no avail. Out of options and energy, the sailors finally reluctantly throw Jonah overboard. And as they do, they ask God to be merciful to them. Immediately, when he goes over, the seas cease from raging. The sailors are awestruck, and they respond in faith. The rest of the story of Jonah is the story that we're really familiar with. God assigns a huge fish to swallow Jonah. I couldn't decide if I liked this picture better or this one to capture the moment. While in the fish's belly for 3 days, Jonah, on his own, without any prompting from the sailors, prays. Turns out the belly of a whale is a great place for contemplation. God, hearing Jonah's prayer, graciously has the fish vomit, and that's what the scripture says, Jonah back up on dry land. That's the first story. The second is just as fun, but we don't know it quite as well. Having learned his lesson, Jonah reluctantly travels at last to Nineveh, where he convinces the king of Assyria to order all creatures, human and animal, to fast and wear sackcloth. So sorry are they for their sins. So can you picture Nineveh's contrite mice dressed in tiny outfits made of sackcloth with their hands folded in prayer? Nineveh is spared God's wrath, thanks in part to those repentant rodents. And of course, the repentant dogs and the repentant cats and the repentant cattle and sheep. Jonah is so mad that he starts sputtering to God as he leaves the city, saying, "That's why I didn't want to come. I knew that you would be merciful." Outside the city limits, Jonah builds a shelter so he can watch to see what happens next. God helps with the construction project by planting a seed that grows up overnight to produce a wonderful big shade tree. Jonah loves that tree. He just is relaxing, enjoying himself there. But the next day, God sends a worm to eat the plant. Jonah is furious. Through an object lesson of plant and worm, God teaches Jonah more about grace. Let me stop here for a second and just say that if Jesus hadn't said, "An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah," we would just read Jonah in this funny way, maybe extract a lesson or two and leave it at that. Well, what kind of lesson can we extract from Jonah? Well, there's this one. The storms in our lives are not a test, but they might be a question. Or this one. Ever notice how often we're mad because God isn't? There's a third. Nothing can overwhelm love, but even a worm can upset pride. But since Jesus does talk about this sign of Jonah, and in fact compares and contrasts Jonah's being in the belly of the whale with his own death and resurrection, there must be more to the story of Jonah than just humor. All week, I was asking myself, why is Jesus so taken by the prophet Jonah? Why is this story so important to him? Last Sunday, Graham gave me an answer in his sermon. Did you know that God can speak to you through Graham's sermons? Speaks to me through them all the time. You will recall that last week, Graham talked about the Baird family tartan. That tartan is so in him that without realizing what he was doing, he painted the basement of their home in tartan colors. Well, I think that it is possible that Jesus internalized the story of Jonah in a similar way. Children like hearing their favorite stories over and over and over again. If a parent or a babysitter tries to skip a page or two, the child will immediately say, no. You get caught and you have to go back. For my son Franklin, the story that he internalized was this one. Guess how much I love you. It's the story of boundless affection and one-upmanship between Little Nut Brown and Big Nut Brown, two plush rabbits. They stretch and they hop to express their love to one another. With each page, the expression of love grows bigger and bigger. The story climaxes with the little rabbit looking up to the moon and saying, I love you right up to the moon. With that, the little rabbit knows that he has given expression to the greatest possible love, and so it's time to go to sleep. So he closes his eyes and goes to sleep. Big Nut Brown tucks the exhausted little bunny into bed. Big Nut Brown then lies down next to the baby rabbit and whispers sweetly in Little Nut Brown's ear, I love you right up to the moon and back. How do I know that my son internalized that story? Because one day, a few years ago, he asked me to sit down and write the words, to the moon and back. So I scribbled out to the moon and back. He had me write it over and over and over again until I wrote it in a way that he said, okay, that's good. I like that one. The next day, he came and he showed me his new tattoo in my handwriting placed over his heart that read, to the moon and back. I think Jesus, in a similar fashion, internalized the story of Jonah. I can imagine Mary and Joseph telling the story of Jonah to Jesus night after night after night. It is a great children's story. Could that be the reason why the story of Jonah can be discerned in Jesus' life and ministry in so many different ways? It's possible. But let me be clear. Jesus doesn't imitate Jonah. Rather, he takes upon himself the mission of Jonah. Jesus redeems and transforms the story. Let me show you what I mean. You remember the story of the stilling of the storm on the Sea of Galilee. In this event, Jesus, the obedient prophet, reenacts the first half of the story of Jonah. Let's put the stories up side by side. And you can see here that for the most part, just like the two stories in Jonah itself are parallel, these two stories are parallel. The difference is that God sends Jonah on a mission of mercy and he refuses to go. God has sent Jesus on a mission of mercy and he agrees to go. They both get on a boat. The wind starts to blow. Jonah falls asleep in that hull of the ship. Jesus falls asleep on the back of the ship. The captain comes and wakes up Jonah, and the disciples come and wake up Jesus. Jonah, and this is key, realizes that he has angered the God of land and sea. Jesus wakes up and he feels the protection of the God of land and sea. So Jonah has the sailors throw him overboard. Jesus, feeling in sync and the protection of God, simply says to the wind and waves, peace, be still. And the wind ceases and the waters calm. It's not just in stories like the stilling of the storm that Jesus lets this story of Jonah come out. It also happens in his teaching. One of Jesus's, probably his most famous parable is the parable of the prodigal son. And in that in that parable, you have the first part of Jonah acted out by the younger prodigal son. The second half of the book of Jonah is acted out by the elder son. The younger son leaves thinking only of himself. The elder son is mad at the father because he is so gracious, just like Jonah was mad at God for being gracious to the Ninevites. At the end of the prodigal son parable, the father challenges the elder brother, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is now found." In a similar way, the book of Jonah ends with the question to the prophet. God asks Jonah, "Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all of the animals. Shouldn't I feel as sorry for them? Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city?" In both cases, in Jonah and in the prodigal son, the story is left open-ended for you and I to finish the story. There are also echoes of Jonah in two other of Jesus' parables, the parable of the Good Samaritan and the parable of the unforgiving servant. Which is to say, again, that Jesus so indwelt the story in his ministry, in his life, that it comes out in his ministry in a variety of ways. That climaxes with that statement that I read from Matthew earlier. Let me read the whole passage. "An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For just as Jonah has 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so for 3 days and 3 nights the Son of Man will be in the heart of the earth. The people of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the proclamation of Jonah. And see, something greater than Jonah is here." So what exactly is this sign of Jonah? The name Jonah means dove. When Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, just as he came up out of the water, suddenly the heavens opened up and the Spirit of God descended like a dove. Was that the sign of Jonah? Had the sign already been given at the baptism of Jesus? Perhaps. But let's look a little further. There are others who suggest that the sign of Jonah is simply the grace of God, expressed in Jonah's life as he is rescued from the belly of a fish, and in the people of Nineveh as they repent. That's possible. It could be. But it might also be more. The sign of Jonah, clearly from the reading of the text, has something to do with the death and resurrection of Jesus. At Easter, we actually celebrate the sign of Jonah, God's gracious love in action in Jesus. The sign of Jonah radiates out from the empty tomb into the whole world through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. As we close, I invite you to let your heart be filled with the joy and the laughter as we take a moment to meditate on the ultimate meaning of the sign of Jonah, the joke God played on the devil, getting the last laugh all the way to eternity. Take a few moments and just let this picture move into your heart. Gracious God, we thank you for the sign of Jonah, for your grace, for your love in our lives. We thank you for Jesus, who brought it to us through the cross, through the empty tomb. Amen.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
You are.
You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you are healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. And that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. Yeah, that is who you are. And that is who you are.
We know that God is a miracle worker through stories that we read, like Jonah and the whale, through Christ being resurrected after 3 days in a tomb. We know that God is the way maker. Amen. Friends, we're so glad that you would participate with us in worship today on this Holy Humor Sunday. Coming up the next week, we are in for a treat. We are hearing from the Reverend Dr. Tom Taylor. You will not want to miss that sermon next week, so come on back to online church for services at 10 and 11. Also coming up this week, very important, we're having a congregational meeting on Wednesday night the 14th, and that meeting will be held on Zoom. We are so excited. We will be electing an associate pastor nominating committee for a new associate pastor, primarily in charge of our Next Gen ministries. Come on out to that congregational meeting. We need you for your vote. And church, as you move from this place now into the rest of your day, into the rest of your week, know that God is a God of love. God loves you exactly as you are, and there's not one thing that you can do to change that. We'll see you right back here for worship next week.